Imagine this. In the dead of night, a shadowy figure slips into the heart of America's financial fortress, unlocking vaults stuffed with secrets that could rewrite the rules of global power. But this isn't a heist movie. It's the real story unfolding right now in Washington. The U.S. government is drowning in $38 trillion of debt, a number so colossal it's hard to grasp. And the twist? They're not planning to pay it back the old-fashioned way. No, they're pulling off the greatest financial illusion of our time, one that could upend everything you thought you knew about money. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a warning about the fragile empire we're all invested in. Welcome to Finance Historian, where we peel back the layers of global markets to reveal the truths that keep you up at night. If you're hooked on these deep dives into economic intrigue, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. What's your city, and what time is it where you are? Let's see just how worldwide this conversation gets. Let's set the stage. Picture the U.S. economy in the 2020s, a powerhouse on the surface, buzzing with tech giants, stock market highs, and endless consumer spending. But beneath that gloss, a storm is brewing. The national debt isn't just big, it's exploding. Every second it balloons by $71,000. Yeah, you heard that right, per second. By the time I've said this, we've just tacked on another couple $100,000 to the pile. And the interest? It's not a side note anymore. Over the past 5 years, those payments have skyrocketed threefold, now gobbling up more of the federal budget than our entire military machine. We're talking billions vanishing into the ether every year, all while the debt-to-GDP ratio climbs to 123%, a mark we haven't seen since the darkest days of World War II, when the nation was locked in a fight for survival against empires across 2 oceans. But here's the kicker. This isn't wartime desperation. This is peacetime excess, a slow-motion crisis born from decades of unchecked borrowing. As we dive deeper, the real intrigue emerges. Governments aren't like you or me when it comes to debt. We max out our cards, and suddenly we're scrambling for side gigs or facing foreclosure. But Uncle Sam? He holds a trump card called monetary sovereignty, the power to print the world's reserve currency at will. The dollar isn't just money. It's the lifeblood of international trade, the benchmark for oil, bonds, and everything in between. And with that comes leverage no other nation can touch. America sits on the planet's biggest gold hoard, locked away in places like Fort Knox, and whispers of a hidden crypto arsenal that could be worth fortunes. This isn't some wild-eyed theory. It's the backbone of modern monetary policy, hidden in plain sight through clever accounting tricks. Now, let's pull back the curtain on one of those tricks, the gold that's been gathering dust in the shadows. Deep in the hills of Kentucky, Fort Knox stands as a symbol of unyielding strength, home to over 8,000 tons of pure bullion. But flip open the government's ledger, and you'll find something jaw-dropping. That treasure is priced at a measly $42 an ounce. Not the $2,500 or $3,000 it's fetching on open markets today. No, a price frozen in time since the early 1970s. Why? Because updating it would shatter the illusion. At market value, America's 261 million ounces aren't worth peanuts. They're a potential windfall of $700 billion to over $1 trillion. That's right, over $1 trillion, sitting there like an unclaimed lottery ticket. But the plot thickens. This undervaluation isn't a clerical error. It's a strategic masterstroke. For half a century, it's kept the balance sheet tidy, avoiding the political fireworks of admitting just how much the dollar's purchasing power has eroded. Imagine the Treasury suddenly marking up that gold to today's rates. No new taxes needed. No frantic money printing from the Fed. Just a quiet revaluation that floods the system with liquidity, easing the debt squeeze without adding a dime to the tab. And the forecasts? They're even more tantalizing. Analysts at firms like JP Morgan are betting gold surges past $5,000 an ounce by 2026, maybe touching $5,400 the year after, fueled by the very instability ripping through global finance. In that scenario, the U.S. could unlock well over $1 trillion in fresh capital, enough to stare down the debt monster without blinking. Of course, you're wondering, if it's this straightforward, why the holdup? Why not just tweak the spreadsheet and call it a day? Because in the high-stakes world of global finance, nothing's that simple. Revaluing gold isn't just math, it's a declaration of war on the status quo. It screams that the dollar's throne is wobbling, that inflation has gnawed away at its foundations. Bondholders, those trillion-dollar investors in U.S. Treasuries, would feel the sting first, their safe havens suddenly devalued in real terms. Central banks worldwide would scramble, rethinking alliances and reserves. It's a move so seismic it could rewrite trade deals, spark currency wars, and even nudge nations toward alternatives like digital yuan or euro blocks. Politicians know this. That's why it stayed buried, a nuclear deterrent in the fiscal arsenal. Yet, as we escalate into the heart of the implications, the pressures are mounting like never before. The dollar, that invincible king, just endured its roughest 6 months since the 1970s oil shocks, shedding 11% against a basket of rival currencies. And the slide isn't stopping. Projections from places like Morgan Stanley peg another 10% drop by the end of 2026. This isn't a blip. It's the unraveling of a post-war order built on American dominance. With the currency weakening on its own, gold revaluation shifts from taboo to triage. It's not radical anymore. It's survival. Add in the crypto angle, that shadowy stockpile Uncle Sam amassed through seizures and sanctions, Bitcoin, Ethereum, you name it, potentially valued at hundreds of billions, and you've got a dual-pronged escape hatch. These digital assets, once dismissed as fringe, are now a hedge against fiat fragility, quietly bolstering the balance sheet in ways Congress barely debates. Why does this matter right now, in the chaotic 2020s? Because we're at a tipping point. Supply chain snarls, geopolitical flashpoints from Ukraine to the South China Sea, and a Fed juggling inflation like a hot potato. These aren't isolated headaches, they're accelerants for the debt fire. Everyday Americans feel it in skyrocketing mortgages, vanishing savings, and pensions that barely keep pace. Globally, it's rippling out. Emerging markets buckling under dollar-denominated loans, allies questioning Washington's reliability. If the U.S. pulls the gold trigger, or dips deeper into crypto, it could stabilize the ship, but at what cost? A revalued dollar might buy time, but it signals to rivals like China, with their own gold grabs and digital currency pushes, that the game's afoot. We're watching the birth of a multipolar financial world, where America's cheat codes face real challengers. And let's not forget the ghosts of history whispering warnings. Flashback to 1933, the depths of the Great Depression. Banks were crumbling, unemployment rampant, and the gold standard was strangling recovery. Enter Franklin D. Roosevelt, who didn't just tweak prices. He seized private gold, banned ownership, and devalued the dollar by 40% overnight. It was ruthless, elegant, and it worked, injecting life into a moribund economy without outright default. Sound familiar? Today's playbook echoes that era, subtle shifts in valuation to dodge the abyss. But unlike the 30s, we're wired into a hyper-connected globe. One wrong move, and the shockwaves could crash markets from Wall Street to Shanghai. As we wrap this up, reflect on the bigger picture. The U.S. debt saga isn't a tale of impending doom. It's a testament to ingenuity. the kind that built empires and will likely sustain this one a while longer. Yet, it leaves us with a sobering truth. Money is power, and power is illusion. That $38 trillion isn't just numbers. It's a bet on America's ability to reinvent the rules before the house of cards topples. Will gold and crypto be the saviors, or just another chapter in fiscal sleight of hand? The clock's ticking. $71,000 a second, and the world's watching. What do you think? Revaluation incoming, or something bolder? Sound off in the comments. Share this with a friend who's debt curious, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. Stay sharp out there. Imagine this. In the dead of night, a nation's leaders stare down a financial abyss, deciding to rewrite the rules of money itself. Not with ink on paper, but by seizing the very gold in your pocket. What if I told you that same playbook, dusted off from the shadows of history, is being revived today? Not with gold bars, but with the wild electric pulse of digital currencies. Buckle up, because what we're about to uncover isn't just history. It's a blueprint for survival in a debt-riddled world that's cracking at the seams. Let's rewind to that desperate hour in 1933. The United States was on its knees, banks shuddering like dominoes, families losing everything in a fog of panic. Franklin D. Roosevelt, thrust into the Oval Office, didn't just tinker around the edges. He struck at the heart of wealth itself. With a stroke of his pen, Executive Order 6102 rang out like a thunderclap. No more private gold. Citizens across the land were ordered to hand over their coins, their bars, their heirlooms to the federal coffers at a fixed price of just $20.67 an ounce. It felt like theft to many, a violation of the American dream. Whispers of tyranny echoed in the streets. But wait, here's where the real intrigue begins. Sex. Mere months after the vaults were filled, the government flipped the script. That same gold, freshly acquired, was reappraised to $35 per ounce. Poof. Overnight, the dollar lost nearly 70% of its purchasing power against the shiny metal it was tied to. The Treasury's books ballooned with newfound strength, injecting lifeblood into a parched economy. Liquidity flooded the system, halting the Great Depression's death spiral. It was ruthless. It sparked outrage. But undeniable results followed. Factories hummed back to life. Jobs returned, and the nation clawed its way out of the pit. This wasn't charity. It was a calculated reset, proving that, in times of crisis, governments can conjure value from thin air without printing a single extra bill. Fast forward to our era, and the echoes of that move feel eerily prescient. The mechanics today would be sleeker, almost invisible, powered by the digital age's precision. Picture the U.S. Treasury issuing certificates to the Federal Reserve, bridging the chasm between gold's dusty official price, stuck at $42 an ounce since the 1970s, and its roaring market reality, now topping $4,000. The Fed wires over the difference in cold, hard cash. Suddenly, billions materialize on the balance sheet, no strings attached. This isn't borrowing that piles on more red ink. It's a straightforward recalibration, aligning the books with the world's true valuation. No debt explosion, just pure, unadulterated fiscal firepower. Now, let's crank up the stakes. Some analysts aren't shy. They're bold. Revalue gold to $72,000 per ounce, and the windfall could slash half the national debt in one fell swoop. Push it to $144,000, and that staggering $38 trillion burden evaporated like morning mist. Absurd? Maybe on the surface. But consider the trajectory. Gold languished around $200 in the early 2000s. Today, over 20 times that. A 4- or 5-fold leap from here? It's not fantasy. It's pattern recognition, the kind that savvy investors live by. Yet gold, for all its timeless allure, belongs to an era of vault doors and armored trucks. The real revolution, the one that keeps me up at night, is unfolding in the intangible realm of code and blockchain. Enter the digital frontier, where money isn't mined from the earth, but forged in algorithms. Governments once dismissed it as play money for tech bros and speculators. Then, in a twist worthy of a thriller, they discovered they were sitting on fortunes. March 2025. President Trump, ever the disruptor, signs an executive order birthing the strategic Bitcoin reserve. No fanfare, no debate, just action. This isn't some think tank pipe dream. It's a war chest, stocked with Bitcoin clawed back from the underworld. Think Silk Road takedowns, ransomware hackers' hauls, fraud rings dismantled by the Justice Department. Instead of fire selling these assets at auction, they're locked away in fortified government wallets. Estimates peg the haul at 305,000 to 328,000 Bitcoin, making Uncle Sam the planet's biggest whale in the crypto seas. At current valuations, that's tens of billions staring back from the ledger. But if Bitcoin's relentless climb holds, and history screams it will, that swells to hundreds of billions, a shadow treasury rivaling entire economies. The plot thickens. This reserve isn't a Bitcoin solo act anymore. The administration's vision expands it into a crypto arsenal. Ethereum's smart contracts, Solana's lightning speed, Cardano's academic rigor, Ripple's cross-border bridges. The U.S. isn't dipping into taxpayer pockets to buy in. It's strategically hoarding what fate and law enforcement has already delivered. This is a seismic mindset flip. For years, seized crypto vanished into auctions like impounded vehicles. Now, it's elevated to the status of oil in strategic tanks or gold in Fort Knox, national treasures held for the long game. And the states? They're not sitting idle. Texas dives in with $5 million in Bitcoin ETFs, while others scramble to legislate their own digital vaults. What was once mocked as fringe mania has morphed into bedrock policy, reshaping the fiscal landscape from the ground up. Why does this logic grip like a vice? Bitcoin's DNA is its unyielding scarcity. 21 million coins, max, etched in unbreakable code. No central banker can inflate it away. No hacker has breached its core protocol. As fiat currencies worldwide balloon, trillions printed to paper over cracks, this fixed supply turns into a magnet for value. If America clutches even a slice of that total and prices edge higher over the coming decade, the reserve evolves from curiosity to cornerstone, a debt-defying asset that could rewrite budget nightmares. Sure, the skeptics howl. Volatility's a beast, speculation's rife, and where are the Nobel economists cheering this on? Fair points on the chaos and the hype. But here's the blind spot they ignore. The government's not waiting for ivory tower nods. The assets are real, they're accruing value daily, and that's not speculation, it's ledger truth. The discomfort peaks when you zoom out to the numbers gnawing at our future. National debt surges at a blistering $71,000 every second. Yes, per second. That's more than a median family's annual income vanishing into the void with each tick of the clock. At this clip, we breach $39 trillion by April, another trillion tacked on in mere months. Interest payments? They've exploded nearly threefold in 5 years, devouring budgets like a runaway fire. By 2028, the Congressional Budget Office warns, They'll claim almost 15% of every federal dollar, eclipsing defense outlays, outstripping education, dwarfing infrastructure dreams. We're not just borrowing to build. We're mortgaging tomorrow to service yesterday. So why does this all matter right now in the humming chaos of the 2020s? Because the cracks are widening. Inflation whispers turning to roars, supply chains fraying, geopolitical storms brewing. Our financial fortress is more illusion than stone. Revaluing gold or unleashing crypto reserves isn't radical. It's reconnaissance, spotting untapped arsenals in plain sight. These moves signal a quiet pivot from endless debt spirals to asset ingenuity. They buy time, inject resilience, and remind us that money's power lies not in what we print, but in what we preserve and reframe. As we pull back from this unfolding saga, one truth lingers like a warning shot. The system we trust is more malleable than we know. Governments aren't passive spectators. They're architects, ready to redraw the map when the old one fails. Will gold's gleam or Bitcoin's code be the spark that steadies the ship? History whispers it could be both. The question for you, watching in the glow of your screen, isn't if change is coming. It's how you'll position yourself before the next revaluation hits. Stay vigilant. The financial shadows hold more light than you think. Imagine this. Every second, the U.S. national debt ticks up by $71,000. That's not hyperbole. It's the relentless math of our fiscal reality. And right now, as interest payments balloon to eclipse everything from national defense to our kids' classrooms, we're trapped in a vicious cycle that's devouring the future. I've spent years digging into the shadows of global finance. And what I'm about to uncover isn't just numbers on a screen. It's a quiet catastrophe unfolding in plain sight, one that could redefine wealth for generations. Let me take you back to the heart of it. Picture the gears of government grinding away. We're borrowing trillions just to service the interest on debts piled up from crises past. It's a spiral that's no longer theoretical. It's our economy's new normal. Those headlines you scroll past about cryptocurrency stockpiles or revaluing America's gold reserves, they're not fringe fantasies. They're lifelines in a system on fire. The U.S. Treasury is backed into a corner, and the old playbooks, hiking taxes, slashing budgets, or praying for a growth miracle, simply can't keep pace with interest compounding like a runaway train. This brings us to the unspoken weapon in the arsenal. Inflation, the silent thief that slips through every wallet unnoticed. As economist Milton Friedman once quipped, it's taxation without representation. No vote required. And in the chaos of recent years, it's been unleashed with surgical precision. Think about the pandemic era. The federal government unleashed nearly $5 trillion in stimulus. Where did it come from? Hardly any taxes. Instead, the Treasury issued a flood of bonds, and the Federal Reserve scooped them up, conjuring dollars out of thin air. That fresh money surged into markets, driving up prices on everything from groceries to housing. Your savings? They eroded in real value, while the government's debt load lightened like mist in the morning sun. It's no secret plot. It's right there in the ledgers. The Fed's balance sheet ballooned from under $4 trillion pre-crisis to a staggering $9 trillion at its zenith. That's $5 trillion of new currency minted to fund the spending spree, with the bill passed straight to anyone clutching dollar bills. The equation is brutally simple. At a modest 2% inflation rate, half your wealth vanishes over 36 years. Crank it to 4%, and it's gone in 18. For the government, staring down a $38 trillion mountain, each tick of inflation shaves billions off the real burden. But for you and me, it's a creeping erosion of hard-earned security. Fast forward to today, and the pressure is intensifying. In the first half of 2025 alone, the dollar shed 11% of its purchasing power, the steepest six-month plunge in half a century. Analysts at firms like Morgan Stanley are forecasting another 10% slide by 2026's close. We're witnessing the unraveling of what was once an unbreakable bull run for the greenback, hammered by converging storms. The Fed's slashing rates from over 5% down toward 2.5% by next year, erasing the edge that kept foreign cash flowing in. Add in tariffs sparking trade wars, political turbulence rattling investor nerves, and suddenly, the dollar's allure fades like a dying star. 1.5. But here's where it gets truly riveting. Connect those threads, and you see strategy masquerading as mayhem. A depreciating dollar supercharges U.S. exports, making our goods cheaper abroad, while slashing the true cost of repaying that colossal debt. Foreign bondholders watch their treasury investments sour in local terms as we hand back devalued dollars. Is this coincidence? Hardly. Whispers in financial circles suggest the current White House volatility, clashing with the Fed, musing about ousting its chair, slapping on the heftiest tariffs since the Smoot-Hawley era amid prolonged shutdowns, might be deliberate. It's chaos engineered to blur risk, a smokescreen for engineered relief. From the outside, it reeks of blunder. From within the Beltway, it's a masterstroke for dodging default. You might dismiss this as madness, and honestly, it is. But stare down $38 trillion growing unchecked, with no bipartisan will to rein it in. And desperation breeds ingenuity. Governments have danced this tango before, just with different steps. Rewind to 1933. FDR, facing the Great Depression's wreckage, issued Executive Order 6102, outlawing private gold hoarding. Americans handed over their stashes at $20 an ounce, only for the price to jump to $35 overnight, a 75% dollar devaluation that inflated away wartime debts but gutted citizens' wealth. Sound familiar? Today, no seizures needed. The game's evolved. Hold on to assets that outpace the dollar's fade. Gold hitting $4,000 while pegged far lower officially. Bitcoin soaring past $60,000, capped at 21 million coins against endless dollar printing. The endgame? The same wealth shift from prudent savers to the ultimate borrower, the U.S. government. Yet there's another layer, one buried deeper in the financial underbelly. Debt monetization, the nuclear option where the central bank directly funds deficits by printing money. It's taboo, outright banned in places like the Eurozone for good reason, as it risks hyperinflation's abyss. But the Fed? They've been flirting with it for over a decade via quantitative easing, rebranded as emergency measures. During the pandemic, reports pegged their purchases at $3.5 trillion in government securities, a direct lifeline to the Treasury's coffers. It's not theory. It's the grease keeping the machine from seizing up. As we peel back these layers, the implications cascade like dominoes. This isn't isolated. It's the blueprint for how superpowers preserve power when the math turns hostile. Interest payments already rivaling core investments signal a tipping point. By 2028, they'll gobble 15% of the budget, per congressional projections, leaving scraps for innovation, security, or social nets. Economies stagnate under the weight. Inequality widens as the wealthy hedge into hard assets, and global trust in the dollar frays, inviting rivals like the yuan to nibble at reserve status. Why does this matter now, in the 2020s frenzy? Because we're at the inflection. Rate cuts accelerate the slide, trade barriers amplify volatility, and election cycles amp the unpredictability. Your retirement nest egg, your home's equity, even the price at the pump, they're all collateral in this high-stakes game. Ignore it, and you're betting against history's harsh lessons. So, as I stand here piecing together these threads from dusty archives to live market feeds, one truth crystallizes. The system's not broken. It's being bent to survive. But at what cost to the rest of us? The spiral tightens. The exits glimmer with promise or peril. Will we cling to the familiar dollar's glow or seek shelter in the rising alternatives? The clock's ticking. $71,000 per second. And the choices we make today will echo through the decades. It's time to wake up before the fire consumes us all. Imagine this. You're watching your savings dwindle, prices skyrocketing at the grocery store, while the U.S. government quietly shaves trillions off its massive debt pile, without firing a single tax hike or slashing a program. It's not a heist movie plot. It's the invisible machinery of modern finance humming just beneath the surface of everyday life. And right now, as interest rates teeter on the edge of cuts, that machine is revving up, poised to accelerate in ways that could redefine your financial future. Buckle up. I'm about to pull back the curtain on how the world's biggest economy is engineering its escape from debt oblivion and why you might end up footing the bill. Let's set the stage. We've all heard the headlines. The U.S. national debt clock ticking past $35 trillion. A number so colossal, it strains the imagination. But here's where the intrigue begins. During the chaos of the pandemic, the Federal Reserve didn't just support the economy. It stepped in as the ultimate insider buyer, snapping up $3.5 trillion in government bonds as Bloomberg crunched the numbers back then. This wasn't some distant investor footing the bill. It was the government, through its central bank, essentially funding its own spending spree by creating money out of thin air. The boundaries between what the Treasury does, fiscal policy like borrowing to build roads or bail out industries, and what the Fed handles, monetary policy like setting interest rates, blurred into a single shadowy operation. It's like a family business where the accountant prints the checks to pay the bills. Technically taboo in many nations because of the risks, but in America, it's been normalized under the banner of quantitative easing. Now, dive deeper. What happens to all that freshly minted cash flooding the system? That's the pivot point, the hidden lever that can either stabilize or destabilize everything. Picture the money as water pouring into a vast reservoir, the banking system. If banks act like eager gardeners, lending it out to businesses, homebuyers, and entrepreneurs, it seeps into the economy, multiplying through loans and investments. That's when the pressure builds. Demand surges, supply chains strain, and suddenly, inflation rears its head, prices climbing like a slow-burn thriller. Flashback to the 1970s, a cautionary tale etched in economic history. Oil shocks hit, governments spent wildly, and banks lent with reckless abandon. The result? Double-digit inflation that devoured savings, sparked recessions, and forced the Fed under Paul Volcker to slam on the brakes with sky-high rates, plunging the nation into pain. Fast forward to our era, and the script flipped. Post-2008 and through the pandemic, banks hoarded those reserves like dragons guarding treasure. Why? The Fed started paying interest on excess reserves, a clever incentive that kept the money parked, earning a tidy return without the risk of lending into an uncertain world. Inflation simmered low for years, manageable, almost polite. But then, it broke free. Supply snarls from global disruptions, endless stimulus checks, and energy crunches pushed prices up, testing the limits of that containment strategy. Here's the escalating twist that's keeping me up at night. The winds are shifting. As the Fed signals rate cuts to fend off a slowdown, that juicy interest on reserves starts to vanish. Banks, ever the profit chasers, will have little reason to sit on piles of cash. They'll unleash it, lending to fuel corporate expansions, consumer splurges, maybe even speculative bubbles. That torrent will cascade into the real economy. Wages chase higher costs, investments pour into assets, and inflation? It won't just tick up, it'll surge, eroding the dollar's buying power like acid on metal. Your grocery run costs more, your rent inches toward the stratosphere, and that debt the government owes? In real terms, it shrinks. Borrowed at yesterday's dollars, repaid with tomorrow's weakened ones. It's a stealthy erosion, happening in the background while headlines scream about jobs and growth. But let's uncover the deeper architecture, the mechanisms designed to make this not just survival, but strategy. At the heart of it all is inflation itself, the unsung hero or villain of debt management. It's the continuous grindstone, wearing down obligations day by day, no votes in Congress required, no public outcry needed. Officials can point to temporary factors, while the balance sheet quietly improves. Pair that with bolder moves on the horizon, and you see the full playbook emerging. Consider gold, that timeless store of value, locked away in Fort Knox and official vaults. For decades, the U.S. Treasury has carried it on the books at a Depression-era price of $42 an ounce, a deliberate undervaluation that ignores today's market reality of over $2,400. Revaluing it to current levels wouldn't create wealth. It'd simply acknowledge what's already there, unlocking an instant accounting windfall estimated at around $700 billion. Not borrowed, not printed. Pure recognition of intrinsic value. It's like rediscovering heirlooms in the attic and suddenly finding your net worth boosted. Then there's the wild card, cryptocurrency, specifically a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The U.S. already holds about 200,000 Bitcoins, seized from illicit operations like the Silk Road takedown, assets worth tens of billions at today's prices, hovering near $60,000 per coin. But Bitcoin's magic lies in its scarcity. A hard-capped supply of 21 million coins immune to the dilution that plagues fiat currencies. As institutions pile in, think ETFs from BlackRock, nation-states dipping toes, the price could rocket. Analysts whisper of $200,000 by the end of the decade. At that level, the reserve swells to $40 billion. Push to $500,000, and it's a $100 billion powerhouse. This isn't gambling. It's positioning for a digital gold rush, building a hedge against a dollar-centric world that's cracking. Now, weave these threads together, and the implications explode. Inflation, targeted at 4 to 5% annually, far above the Fed's 2% whisper, becomes the engine. Unspoken, it creeps in via green energy transitions that spike costs, endless fiscal largesse, and the lingering echoes of monetary expansion. Over a decade, at 4% compounded, that $35 trillion debt loses about 30% of its real value. Trillions erased without a penny repaid. Add the one shot from gold revaluation, say $700 billion, and the appreciating crypto pot, potentially doubling or tripling. The math paints a picture of $10 to $15 trillion in effective relief, all while the government sails on, untouchable. Why does this matter right now, in the 2020s? Because the clock is ticking louder than ever. This isn't isolated alchemy. It's a high-stakes game on the global board. Other powers are watching, learning, countering. China, with its massive gold stockpiles, could flip the script by revaluing overnight, bolstering its yuan. Russia and the BRICS bloc are already stacking bullion at record clips, diversifying from dollar bonds. And don't sleep on digital currencies. Central bank digital versions tailored to sidestep U.S. financial choke points like SWIFT. Nations are dumping treasuries, quietly at first, then in waves. The post-World War II order, built on the dollar's unassailable throne at Bretton Woods, is fracturing. The U.S. isn't just managing debt, it's racing to front-run the system's own implosion, grabbing advantages before rivals strike back. Financial warfare doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It whispers through backroom deals and balance sheet tweaks. Speed wins, hesitation loses. As the pieces converge, the personal stakes hit home hard. You're not a spectator in this drama. You're in the cast, whether you like it or not. If gold surges and Bitcoin moons, the government's coffers swell. But your everyday holdings? Most Americans are anchored in dollars. Checking accounts, 401ks heavy on stocks and bonds, maybe a home equity line. Inflation at 4 to 5% doesn't just nibble, it devours. That retirement nest egg buys fewer groceries as food prices climb 20 to 30% over years. Healthcare premiums balloon, education costs spiral, and wages? They trail, stuck in a labor market that rewards asset owners over paycheck earners. It's the ultimate wealth transfer, from savers and the middle class to the grand debtor-in-chief, the U.S. government, which controls the very money you're compelled to use. You might be tempted to fight back, scramble into gold ETFs or Bitcoin wallets. And sure, that's an option, one that's minted fortunes for the early and bold. But here's the bitter punchline. When the Treasury finally marks up its gold from $42 to market, the gains accrue to the public coffers, not your personal stash bought at full freight. You've paid the premium. They pocket the revaluation. It's a rigged arena where the house always adjusts the odds. So, as we pull back from this labyrinth, reflect on the fragility of it all. The U.S. financial system, once the envy of the world, now dances on the edge of ingenuity and illusion. Inflation as the silent assassin, gold and crypto as speculative lifelines. It's kept the debt beast at bay, but at what cost to your security? The perfect crime, as some call it, thrives in denial. Officials shrug off the symptoms, you feel the squeeze, and the global order reshuffles without a ballot. Awareness is your first weapon. Question the narratives, diversify wisely, and remember, in the theater of money, the audience often pays the price for the show's grand finale. What role will you play next? The curtain's rising. Imagine this. You're betting your future on Bitcoin, shelling out $60,000 for a single coin, while the U.S. government scoops them up for pennies through asset seizures. Who rides the wave to the moon when prices skyrocket? Not you. The house always wins. And as this hidden advantage plays out, it threatens to unravel the very foundation of global finance. Buckle up, because what I'm about to uncover isn't just a market quirk. It's a seismic shift that could redefine wealth, power, and stability in the 2020s. Let's pull back the curtain on how this all started. Picture federal agents raiding dark web operations or busting illicit trades. Suddenly, the government inherits a treasure trove of cryptocurrencies at virtually no cost. These aren't speculative gambles for Uncle Sam. They're windfalls locked away in secure vaults. Meanwhile, everyday investors like you and me dive into exchanges, chasing the next bull run, absorbing all the volatility and downside. It's a classic tale of asymmetric bets. They get the upside with zero skin in the game, while we shoulder the crashes. This isn't some shadowy cabal pulling strings. It's baked into the system's design, a matter of who gets first dibs through enforcement and timing. But dig deeper, and you'll find layers that few dare to peel back. Rewind to the roots of American fiscal dominance. For decades, U.S. Treasury bonds have been the gold standard of safety, untouchable, backed by the unshakable promise of the world's superpower. Foreign nations, from sovereign wealth funds to central banks, have piled in, treating them like a fortress against chaos. Yet, beneath this facade, a subtle erosion is underway. The U.S. isn't just borrowing, it's engineering a slow bleed on its currency to chip away at that mountain of debt. Inflation isn't an accident. It's the silent weapon, turning nominal repayments into real-world losses for anyone holding those bonds overseas. Now, watch how the cracks are spreading. Imagine you're a foreign creditor, China, Japan, or a Gulf oil giant, pouring billions into U.S. debt, only to see your returns devoured by a depreciating dollar. Why stick around when the math no longer adds up? Over the past few years, we've seen the exodus begin. China's slashed its treasury holdings by hundreds of billions, redirecting funds into yuan-strengthening moves and alternative reserves. Japan clings on as America's biggest foreign lender. But its own ballooning deficits and aging population are forcing tough choices. And don't get me started on the Middle East. Flush with petrodollars, they're pivoting to euros, gold, and even yuan-denominated oil trades, hedging against what they see coming. The pool of willing buyers is drying up, just as Washington needs to flood the market with more IOUs to fund everything from entitlements to defense. This sets off a vicious spiral, one that history whispers is all too familiar. But we're racing toward it at warp speed. With fewer hands reaching for U.S. debt, yields have to climb to lure investors back. Higher interest rates? They jack up the cost of servicing that $38 trillion behemoth, demanding even more borrowing to keep the lights on. It's a feedback loop from hell. More debt chases scarcer capital, spiking rates further, inflating costs, and fueling the frenzy. Enter the Federal Reserve, the cavalry that always arrives. Sort of. Through rounds of quantitative easing, they become the buyer no one else wants to be, printing fresh dollars to snap up bonds at artificially low rates. But let's call it what it is. Money creation on steroids, injecting liquidity that seeps into prices across the board. Inflation isn't a side effect. It's the main event, quietly taxing savers and rewarding those with hard assets. We've danced this tango before, haven't we? Flashback to the Weimar Republic in 1920s Germany, where hyperinflation turned wheelbarrows of cash into wallpaper amid street riots. Or Zimbabwe in the 2000s, where printing presses ran wild until the currency was worthless and bread lines stretched for miles. Argentina and Venezuela? Same script, different actors. Governments drowning in red ink, cranking the money supply until trust shatters and economies implode. The parallels aren't coincidences. They're warnings etched in economic ledgers. Nations hit the wall when debts outpace discipline, resorting to the central bank as a lifeline that becomes a noose. Of course, America isn't those places. Yet. We've got aces up our sleeve that buy us breathing room. The dollar's throne as the world's reserve currency means everyone still needs it for trade, oil, and safety. Our military footprint circles the globe, deterring challengers and enforcing dollar hegemony. And the sheer depth of Wall Street? It's a magnet for capital, unmatched in liquidity and innovation. These buffers have postponed the reckoning, letting us print and spend like no other. But here's the gut punch. No empire ever saw its fall until it was too late. Rome clipped silver from coins to fund endless conquests, sparking inflation that hollowed out the republic. Spain's galleons hauled New World gold, flooding markets and devaluing their own wealth overnight. Britain, the superpower of its day, bled dry financing 2 world wars, ceding the crown to a rising America. The tools evolve: inflation, debasement, overextension, but the endings echo. Hubris meets reality. So, why does this hit different right now, in the roaring 2020s? Because the gears are grinding louder than ever. That $38 trillion debt isn't vanishing through budget cuts or miracle growth. It's being whittled away in plain sight. Asset revaluations, like undervalued gold on the Fed's books or seized Bitcoin windfalls, pad the balances without fanfare. Currency tweaks and inflationary policies do the heavy lifting, eroding the dollar's purchasing power while the elite hedge with real assets. The government's already positioned, hoarding gold at antique prices, snapping up crypto for free, while you're left chasing highs in a market tilted against you. Foreign jitters are mounting, rates are twitching upward, and the Fed's balance sheet balloons. We're not in crisis mode. Yet. But the tremors are building. As I stand here piecing this together, one truth stares back unblinking. History isn't a straight line. It's a cycle we ignore at our peril. Governments swear they've learned the lessons, vowing smarter paths forward. But the patterns persist, dooming us to replay the drama until we choose differently. What's undeniable is the transfer underway. The greatest wealth shift of our era, from dollar holders to those with tangible stakes. You're living it, frame by frame. A superpower reshaping its burdens onto the world stage, one printed bill at a time. The question isn't if the music stops. It's what you'll hold when it does. Will you join the revaluation winners or watch from the sidelines as the system resets? The clock's ticking, and the reveal is just beginning.